Thank you all for being here this morning. By way of announcements, we'd like to remind you that today is the beheading of St. John the Baptist on our calendar here at the Monastery, the revised Julian calendar. And so that's why we're wearing the purple vestments, and today is a fast day. But this is the last Sunday that's a fast day between now and mid-November, when we begin the fast for Advent, for the Christmas fast. We'd like to welcome a couple of visitors here. We have Edmund visiting from Sacramento over here, and we have Jordan Harris visiting from the peninsula over here. Both of them are here for this weekend for the first time. So I hope you make them feel at home, and I hope you're able to stay for lunch with us afterwards. We always have an agape potluck luncheon afterwards to enjoy fellowship with one another. I'd like to remind you that Alameda County Health Department's issued a health order on August 3rd, recommending that everyone over 12 be vaccinated. Requires everyone over 2 to wear masks when indoors, in workplaces, and public settings, with limited exemptions. And those exemptions include people not wearing face coverings while eating and drinking, such as at our lunch. But when we're not eating and drinking, we should try to wear masks indoors. And we also, it exempts in religious services those who are performers, those who are serving at the altar, who sing, and also those who sing the responses for liturgy. And also to remove the mask anytime it's necessary for religious worship. So I ask you to please try to comply as best you can with this health order, so we keep everyone safe. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. As I said, today is the beheading of St. John the Baptist, a fast day in the Orthodox Church. Herod Antipas was the son of the elder Herod, the one who slew the children in Bethlehem. This was his son that we're talking about, who had St. John the Baptist beheaded. He was the ruler of Galilee when John the Baptist was preaching, and he was married to the daughter of Aretas, an Arabian prince. But Herod put away his lawful wife, and unlawfully took Herodias to be his concubine. And Herodias was the wife of his brother Philip, also son of Herod, who was still living. So John the Baptist, among the things he preached, he stood up against this lawlessness and strongly denounced Herod. So Herod had John thrown into prison, as we heard of the gospel. And during a banquet at his court in Sebastia in Galilee, Salome, the daughter of Herodias and Philip, danced before the guests. So this was his stepdaughter. And Herod, drunk with wine, was so taken by this dance that he promised Salome anything she asked of him, even if it were half of his kingdom. Herodias, the girl's mother, persuaded Salome to ask for the head of John the Baptist. So Herod gave the order, and John was beheaded in prison, and his head was presented to him on a platter. John's disciples took the body of their teacher by night and buried it with honor. But Herodias kept the head. They say that she pierced John's tongue with a needle repeatedly and buried his head in an unclean place. What later happened to the head of John the Baptist can be read in the Lives of the Saints, particularly February 24th. An archaeologist recently found the ruins of the large banquet room in the palace where this dance would have taken place. But as for this group of evildoers, God's punishment later befell them. You won't find it in the gospel, you'll find it in the Lives of the Saints, in the tradition of the church. We find out that Prince Aretas the father of Herodias, set out to avenge his daughter's honor and waged war against Herod with his army and defeated him. And the defeated Herod was sentenced by the Roman Emperor Caligula to exile, at first in Gaul and later in Spain. As I said, through the Church's tradition as recorded in the lives of the saints, we learn how they met their end. Herod and Herodias lived in poverty and humiliation and exile, until the earth would later open up and swallow them during an earthquake. But before that, Salome, Herodias' daughter, died an evil death in a river in Spain. It's called Sicris in Greek, but Segre in Spanish. It flows from the Pyrenees into Spain. St. Nikolai Velimirovich of Zicha says if you observe how people die, sometimes you will see that the death of people resembles their sins. As it is written in the Gospel, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. He says every sin is like a knife, and men sometimes are slain by the very sin that they most readily committed. And he cites Salome as an example of this, whom he calls the foul daughter of Herodias, the one who asked for and received from Herod the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Condemned to exile and living in the Spanish town of Lerida, or Laredo, with the exiled Herod and Herodias, Salome one day set out across the frozen river of Sicris, and the ice broke beneath her feet. She fell into the water up to her neck, and shards of ice jammed around her neck, and she struggled, treading her feet in the water as she once danced at the court of Herod. But she was unable to raise herself up or to sink down, and a sharp shard of ice severed her head. The water carried her body away downriver, and her head remained on the ice, and was brought to Herodias, her mother, on a platter, as once the head of John the Baptist was brought. So behold how terribly a death could sometimes resemble the great sins we commit. St. John's beheading occurred, according to tradition, just before Passover. So you're wondering, why do we celebrate it August 29th? It's because the Emperor Constantine and the Empress Helena built a magnificent church over the site of St. John's martyrdom in Sebastia in Palestine, in Galilee. And the church was consecrated on August 29th. So that's why we celebrate on this day. Also, together with the relics of St. John, placed there, also the relics of John's disciples, 2 of John's disciples were also placed in that church. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Please come with your right hand cupped over your left as you come for the